I'm Dan Johnson talking to Garrett Com, and Garrett has a company called, well, it's kind of got his name right built into it, Gairplanes. So
exactly.
You can't hardly forget that. We went flying in your airplane today, Garrett, and I want you to tell me a little bit about the background of the airplane.
Background of the airplane simply is this. I used to work for the factory up in Canada. The old model designed in the 80s called the Merlin. And that was produced by Blue Yonder Aviation in Calgary, and that's where I worked for about 3 years as a flight instructor and a mechanic on the plane. Since that point in time, I've always had a soft spot for the Merlin. Nice stable airplane, easy to fly, easy to get around in, easy to land, all those things. So I thought, you know, if I make a few more improvements, change a few parameters just the way I like it, I think we'll have a real winner here.
But give me some of the highlights of what you decided to change from Merlin to, this is called the Mule.
Mule, yeah.
And so from Merlin to Mule, give me the high points. What you
The high
changed.
points, first off, would be the extended landing gear. We've extended the landing gear about 8 inches higher than it used to be. And when I first started flying in Arizona, I noticed all the scrub brush there, but I knew I wanted to fly in between them. But if I did have to fly over top of one, I knew my propeller was going to be clear. So that's one of the main things we did. The second thing we did is we took the rudder pedals off of the floorboards and we raised them up so that you have no crumb catchers on the floorboards anymore. And it gives the idea that there's a lot more space in the airplane as well. Thirdly, we extended the doors. The doors are a lot wider than they used to be. It used to be a 40-inch cockpit. Now we've got 47 inches at the shoulder. We went to an electronic panel that we have synthetic vision now. We have the full MGL package. That's just been awesome to have synthetic vision, have the GPS program right into your panel, all that stuff at a glance. You can see exactly what's going on in the engine. I make the claim that if everything's in the green, you're good. Anything shows up yellow, let's take a look at what's going on. Anything in the red, let's take action. And that just allows the privilege of flying just to be that much easier.
That's a good mantra. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about construction of the airplane.
We construct the fuselage out of 5/8 inch 035 chromoly tubing. We try to put as much of the aircraft in tension as possible. And why we do that is it's very tough to push a rope, but it's very secure to pull a rope. So we try to put as much of the structure into tension as possible so that we have a nice strong structure to work with. Over top of that chromoly product, we put your fabric. We'll talk about that in a later day. But on the wings itself, it's an aluminum ring with aluminum ribs and it has a foam core to it. So that allows it to have a lot of torsion and a lot of strength to it. We have a single spar going down just behind the leading edge of the wing.
Box spar, round spar?
It is a angle aluminum.
Angle aluminum, okay.
Top and bottom, and then we have a double plate 40 thou aluminum 2023. And that gives us a lot of strength, that gives us a lot of stability, and it just makes it a really strong airplane.
What is a builder up against to build the airplane, Garrett?
The builder is up against about 400 hours of commitment to build the airframe. Okay. So we'll supply him with the kit, which includes the fuselage, the landing gear, the tail feathers, the leading edge of the wings, all the parts and pieces, hardware that goes along with it, all the raw materials in regard to aluminum patterns, Lexan for the windshield and doors, and for about 400 hours you should be darn close to finishing. We supply everything you need in regard to the windshield pattern, the wing rib pattern, some of the gussets that hold the wing ribs into place. That's all pre-made for you. So it really is just taking a IKEA flat box. It just has wings and wheels and an engine. So we just give it to you that way. And if you got some skills, you can put together a barbecue from a Home Depot or Lowe's or something. You should be just fine getting this plane into place.
Okay, fair enough.
And you know, everyone's preference is different, and we're not going to impose saying you have to use this engine, you have to use this covering, you have to use this. We leave it up to you so that you have more control over your own project.
So we've built the airplane now, we're ready to go fly it. How do I learn how to fly this thing, Garrett?
Well, you can do two different ways. You can have your pilot's license, which is a regular to anything you fly with Pipers or Cessnas or the rest of it, or you can choose the LSA route, which is 10 hours of dual instruction, 10 hours of solo, and then you're ready to fly this airplane. This airplane can fit into the LSA category rated at 1,320 pounds, or we can go into the experimental category, which rates it at 1,500 pounds. Regardless of what weight category you choose, the frame and structure is sufficient to handle that.
Okay, so it's really a 1,500 pound frame that you limit to 1,320 for those that want to do it under the light sport parameters and use a sport pilot certificate or private and no medical and that kind of thing. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. So. All right, so let's go aloft in the airplane now. Let's kind of walk me through what we did. We went out to the Ultralight strip, which is just over this way. How long is that strip?
The strip is about 1,200, I believe.
Okay, so 1,200 foot long. That's max. That's end to end. we knew we weren't going to use anywhere near that, and we did not.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go down to the end of the runway and walk me through the process of a takeoff, Gary.
All right. So what we do first off is we check, make sure our area is secure. We check to make sure the cabin is secure, your doors are locked, the fuel is on, the seat belts are on, instruments are all in the green, and then we kind of verify that we're good to go. Pre-flight briefing, what's going to happen if we have any kind of issue, and then we're ready to go. Look around one last time, firewall the throttle, put that stick just slightly ahead of forward, watch your airspeed like a rear view mirror. You don't stare in the rear view mirror, just glance at it. Look for that 28, 29 miles an hour. That means you're just about ready to fly. The tail will start coming up. You ease it back just past center stick, and you'll just rise off the ground like that.
It was off the ground quickly. I don't know, 300 feet. It was hard to tell,
Yeah.
but it was quick. And then the climb out from there. Let's go through some speeds. Let's talk about what kind of climb rate that produces and how the cooling works while you're doing those climbs, Gary.
Let's take for example, the greatest angle of climb.
Okay.
That would be at about the 50, 51 knots. And I don't know the angles on it, but you've got to glance out the side to see where you're going.
It was steep, yeah.
And then the best rate of climb is probably at 56, 55 knots, and that will give you anywhere between 8 and 1,000 feet a minute, depending on who's in, what weight you're carrying, how much fuel you're carrying, all those parameters. So once you establish yourself in the climb, just keep in touch with your gauges, monitor your gauges. We're operating typically around the 190 to 204 range for both cylinder head temperature and oil temperature, and we just kind of monitor it all the way through. As long as those temperatures aren't exceeded, we don't shallow water or climb. We just keep augering up as best we possibly can at those parameters.
We did a lot of climbing like that because of going up and down for stalls and whatnot, and I never saw the temperatures go out of the green. I mean, they were well within what I would call the green range.
Well, what we've done is we've included a kind of a gate valve on the radiator that as you need it, you can close it off or you can open it up.
Oh, okay.
And so we've got it set for today's temperature, and it proved itself very well.
Okay, and I'm going to say right now that the visibility was fantastic. The skylight worked much better than I thought in turns. I was like looking out a picture window in a bank to the opposite side where I've got the right angles on the skylight. Tell me what a slow cruise would be. Tell me what a fast cruise would be, both in power setting and in resultant speed.
Okay, let's go with the equal cruise. First off, we would probably leave the engine RPM at around 4,900 RPM, and that quiets down the cockpit quite a bit. It settles everything in. You just trim it out just ever so slightly. But then once you bump up the speed, we're maybe looking at 53, 5,400 RPM, and then we're going to be seeing that 75 to 79 knot range.
Now, what kind of fuel burns do you see at those?
At those settings, we're seeing about 5.5 gallons.
That would be
an
the
hour.
high setting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And why that is that we're loading up this prop because we want it as a climb prop right now.
Okay.
So we're not getting the airflow through it that we need at those higher RPMs. We're still working away on that prop, and that's using a lot of fuel.
Describe the controls that are in the cockpit, and then we'll talk about how we use them in various ways. So a description first.
We use a center stick, and we have a Y yoke on it. So you have one for the pilot, one for the student. And that moves side to side for roll rate, and then front and back for making the houses get bigger and go faster, and make the houses get smaller and go slower. You want to use your rudder when you're flying this aircraft, and that helps keep your controls so the ball is in the center. We have a trim system as well that's spring loaded, and that helps keep the stick exactly where you've left it. And for all those controls, it feels heavier than the plane we're flying. It does have some push back to it, but only because we want it to be able to return to the center, because you would activate the turn, you center it, and then you stay in the turn and bring it all the way through. So the controls are a little heavier than what you may find in other aircraft, but that being said, it gives it almost a cruise control feel.
I actually thought the controls were quite light. The forces, you do need to move the stick a little further. As Dave pointed out before we flew, he's very familiar with the Merlin, and that was true, that you do move the stick a greater amount. The trade-out, of course, then is the forces are less. But
yeah.
And the rudder pedals, I thought, were almost light to the touch. So now let's talk about the coordination between stick and rudder. And you mentioned that it's a rudder-dependent airplane, meaning you need to use the rudder. But what does that mean? How much are you going to do for, let's say, just standard turn? Nothing weird or radical.
In regard to this airplane, we want you to initiate the turn with the rudder that you're going towards. So if you want to make a left turn, you want to think about just putting some pressure on the rudder and then bringing your stick into play as it comes along. Once you've established your bank rate, then you want to neutralize the stick and let the plane fly itself out of the turn. And with time, without the rudder pressure, the plane will actually come like this and then eventually level out and just carry on the way it was supposed to go.
Okay.
But it has to start with rudder. Without that, there's an adverse yaw issue with it.
You need to, I felt like you needed to lead with rudder, which is what you just said. But then your pressure on it became very modest. I mean, you're not like burying the rudder. And the motion of the rudder is not so deep, but it needs to be there. It is a tail dragger. You should have happy feet. And what that phrase means is not wildly pushing the rudder pedals back and forth, but constantly making a series of small motions, never letting your feet be idle.
You brought up something very interesting earlier, Dan, is that you didn't need a lot of rudder to make the action happen. And that's the unfortunate thing, is when you transition from one tail dragger to this one, is that you'll find it's quarter inch here, quarter inch there, half inch, quarter, and back you go.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it was small motions, necessary but small. And that made the turns well. So we did all that. We did some maneuverings, we did some tight turns, some of the other stuff. I didn't find any unacceptable characteristics. In fact, I found none at all. So then I said, let's go ahead and do a series of stalls. Walk me through what we did on an approach stall, which means power is reduced.
All right, on the power is reduced stall, what we found is that when you back off the power and you try to hold altitude just by pulling gradual increments on your stick, we got to a point where we just kept on pulling back and pulling back. We reached the back stop and we just kind of sunk.
You got sinking feeling first.
Didn't brake.
Before any brake.
It didn't go to the left, it didn't go to the right, it just kind of floated its way all the way down.
But it felt like we were just sort of settling down.
Yeah.
And then by really aggravating it, when I said, let's do a little more aggressive one, you did get a brake. Describe how that worked.
All right, so what we did is we backed off the power a little bit more than normal, and then we went a little quicker. Instead of those gradual moments to keep altitude, we just yarded back on it. And what we found with that is it kind of got to a point, very steep angle, and then it just kind of came back. And then as we fixed that up, we got back to level flight. The interesting thing that I learned today is that as we went into that aggravated stall, let go of the stick, it actually came back to a point where it accelerated down and then it kind of recovered.
Right.
Almost on its own, I want to say. It wasn't as easy as just that, but it didn't head towards the ground like it wanted to go there. It wanted to keep flying.
Sure, that was in stall. So as long as you touched on that point, let's go to that other thing we did, which is this longitudinal stability test, basically. And what you do in that test, and I'm going to have you describe what occurred, but in those tests, what you do is you get the airplane trimmed up. You don't have to be at cruise speed, power setting, but you're flying normally, let's just call it. And then you disturb the stick. You pull the stick back a little bit and you completely let go, or you move the stick forward a little bit and let go. Now, some people are a little nervous to do that, and there are some airplanes where that nervousness is justified. Tell me what happened when we did that in the Mule.
Well, in the Mule today, as we were going along, I would launch the stick back, and at the point we would just release it, the stick would return to its normal position. We would slowly level out, descend a little bit, pick up enough speed, and then it kind of just found its own little way. It's something that I've never done before, but it was very interesting seeing how it responded. It responded.
So what happens is if I do this with my hand, we got the nose up, the nose went down, and then it came back. But in each one of those, it gets less.
Yeah.
Oh, the amplitude of movement
right.
Becomes
exactly
less
right.
then, and that's an excellent sign. That means it's working. It's trying to find its right spot. We just gave up control, and it went, okay, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. Okay, now I got it. It had to do a little thinking, and then it got it. Some airplanes, if they're dynamically unstable, that gets worse with every one.
Okay.
This did not do that at all. Now, what happened when we moved the stick forward a little bit, which is one that people kind of go, I don't know about that. Push forward on the stick and let go. What happened?
Well, in that case, what we did is we pushed the stick forward. We picked up some airspeed. We started seeing the ground a little bit closer and closer. We let go of the stick. Once again, the stick returned back to its own position based on the trim system with the springs, and then it slowly recovered. It picked up that speed, the speed created some lift, and it brought it back to just a small little fluoid, as you were mentioning before.
It got less and less and less, and it did that pretty quickly. Some people say, well, it should do that in less than 3 oscillations. I would say it was 1.5 oscillations, and it was clear it was returning to normal. Okay, so I wanted to do that because now we went and did something else. We did some power on stalls, which is sometimes called a departure stall, and then we did some accelerated stalls in each direction. So talk to me through the departure stall.
Well, the departure stall, as we talked about, we were climbing at regular power, and we add a little bit more
Which is about
power.
how much?
Let's say 5,200 RPM.
Okay.
And so we bumped it up a little bit more, and we kept on yarding back on the stick, because this would simulate like we were taking off out of the airport. We've lost our horizon. We're not sure where we're at. We just keep pulling up because we want to get away. So we kept on pulling up, pulling up. Well, my speedometer goes to 0.
It did. I saw it at 0 a lot.
We're still just kind of hanging on the prop. I don't know we were making any forward pressure. I don't know if we were going up, but we're just there. And it broke a little bit to the one way, but a quick recovery, and we were back in business. So
if anything, all it did was wallow a little bit, kind of wander at the top, but showed no sign of actually breaking over whatsoever that I saw. And that was pretty aggravated. I want you to describe what we had. I like that MGL. It's got a very nice display, a lot of information, but the cleanliness of the display is noteworthy. And I want you to tell me what you saw when we were doing that.
Well, it was very interesting because, I had never put it in that steep of an angle before. And so I'm watching you doing what you're going to do, and I'm watching the screen, and the horizon disappears, and it kind of goes to stars. So it was just the oddest thing. I had a chuckle to myself. I thought, this can't be good.
Didn't know it was capable of showing stars.
I thought we were going to go back over like this, but it handled it really well.
We probably weren't all that steep actually, but it does feel like it. And if all you're seeing is sky, maybe you should lower the nose.
Let go of the stick, let it fly.
Okay, so then we did, I did the accelerated stalls. So for those that don't know, an accelerated stall is just a stall in a turn, a modest angle of bank, usually 20 or 30 degrees is enough, and then just start pulling the stick back and see what happens. And the stick gets back pretty far, and the angle got pretty high again.
Saw the stars.
And then what happened?
Not a lot. I don't remember too much of anything.
Well, it rolled to level.
Rolled to level again.
Rolled to level. And then we did it to the right. Same thing again, angle steeper and steeper, roll to level. Those are all good qualities about this airplane. Its stall characteristics, as far as I'm concerned, it's not an extensive test flying routine. No. Maybe somebody could aggravate it even more, but for what I did, I saw no evil bones at all. This is one of those airplanes about which I think I could safely say, if something's not going right, best thing to do is let go.
Yeah.
You let go of all the controls, odds are this airplane's going to fly out straight. Walk me through the process of the landing. Here we're coming into this relatively short strip. What seemingly was tailwind, although again, not much wind, but walk me through it.
What we do is we always set it up so that we pick a bug on the windshield. And we use our line of sight through that bug, and we hook up with the very end of the runway. And what we do is we adjust the airplane accordingly.
Airplane is level during that time, basically? Okay.
And what we do is we adjust the speed of it with the stick, and we adjust the sink rate with our throttle, and we just make sure that that bug lines up with the end of that runway the whole way through. We're looking for a speed of about 50 to 55 knots, and we just keep that bug on the windshield heading towards we want. As we get closer, as we're over the fence, then we can pull some of that power off a little bit more, and that increases the sink rate. At that point in time, as we get close, we start yarding back on the stick, and once again, because we're so slow, we're yarding back a fair amount.
The stick motions had to be greater at those speeds. Okay.
And so what we do is we just pull back on up elevator, and that arrests some of the descent, but as you and I know, we had a good descent rate as we touched down. What that did is it made us land a little bit harder, but with the bungee system, the gear legs splayed out and then came back, but it wasn't enough that it launched us back up into the air. So when we hit the brakes, I think we came to a stop in about 400 feet, give or take.
Yeah, we had one landing that I thought it was going to be pretty firm. Because we were deliberately trying to do this short field landing and plop it into some place where you need to. The touchdown was so soft, I was actually quite amazed. I thought it was going to be more rude and firm than that, and the airplane didn't seem to be stressed by that at all.
Yeah. Well, I got really good seats in here.
Well, maybe that helped, but boy, and you got large tires too. Not the giant tires that some people like to use, but obviously you get some shock absorption out of that. But that wasn't really the main key here. The main key was how you've done the landing gear, which is one of those things you changed from Merlin to Mule.
Yeah, we made the attach points different than the clamps that they had used previously.
Braking then, let's talk a little bit about braking and taxiing, and then we're about wrapped up on the flight.
Yeah, what we did is we have the Matco double puck system on this setup. And what the double puck means is that there's one brake pad here and there's another brake pad on the other side working on that same rotor. That gives us really good effective braking. My brake lever, if you will, on the foot brake, it moves a maximum of about an inch or so.
Oh, is that right?
And that's all it takes. So when we're hard on left rudder or hard on right rudder, our foot, it actually touches the brake ever so slightly to give us that extra advantage of turning.
Oh, I see. That's why you've done it that way. Okay, that's clever. So on the right side of the aircraft, there were no brakes. So you asked me, because you fly from the left side when you're giving demo flights and stuff, you said, go ahead and steer it here. And we had a fairly narrow little path, and my experience at steering the airplane without any brakes that I could use was, it was still quite responsive. Yep. You would have no trouble maneuvering. We were on dirt, that'll slow, and these tires and everything else will slow you down a little bit. Okay, good stuff there. I think we've kind of covered everything we need to on the airplane, but I'm sure there's some question I forgot to ask you here. So how do we find you on the web, Garrett, to learn more or to go further with a purchase idea?
On how to get a hold of us, first off, take a look at gairplanes.com. We have a phone number on there, but I'll give it to you just the same. It's 623-606-9662, and I always answer my phone. There's no answering machine if I can possibly help it.
You can find more about Garrett's airplane, see some other videos we've done, read some reports about it, but also all these other lovely sport and recreational airplanes. If it's affordable, I try and cover it on buydanjohnson.com.